The year was 1867, and the land between the Colorado Plateau and the Salt River burned under a pitiless sun. The wind carried no kindness, only dust, heat, and the faint smell of something long dead. Elias Boone rode slow, rein slack in his callous hands, eyes half shut against the glare. He was 40 years old and carried every year of it like a stone in his chest. His horse, a chestnut mare named Bess, stumbled with exhaustion. Both man and beast were parched to the bone. Dry Creek Ranch appeared as a shimmer ahead, his patch of earth, his last claim to meaning. The well behind his corral was the only water for miles, and he guarded it the way other men guarded gold. Since the war ended and his wife, Martha, was taken in a raid, he'd lived like a ghost among his fences, mending them by day, staring into the fire by night. As he neared the windmill, a buzzard lifted from the sand. Something lay near the well. 2 bodies. His heart clenched. He swung down, rifle ready. They were Apache, one barely a man, maybe 20, the other older, 35 at most. Their faces were cracked from the sun, lips split and bleeding. The older one's leg was mangled by a bullet. The young one's chest barely rose. Elias cursed under his breath. The frontier was a graveyard full of reasons to hate, and these men had likely ridden in the same warpath that burned his house. Behind him came the pounding of hooves. Cal Avery, his ranch hand, 32, quick to anger, quicker to drink. Hell, Boone, Cal spat, reining in. Don't tell me you're thinking of helping them devils. They're dying, Elias said quietly. Good. Cal's hand rested on his revolver. Ain't nothing left to do but finish the job. Elias's jaw worked. They're human. So was Martha, Cal snapped. So were the Crawfords, the Steeles, the kids they skinned alive down south. You gonna water that, too? The air between them trembled. Elias looked at the cracked lips of the younger Apache, the faint pulse fluttering at his throat. He raised his rifle, not at Cal, not yet, but at the dirt beside the dying men. Ride home, Cal. Cal glared. You're out of your mind. Maybe, Elias said, but I'm still the one who pays you. Cal spat into the sand, turned his horse. You'll get yours, Boone. You keep feeding snakes, they'll bite. He rode off, dust curling behind him like smoke. Elias stood still a long while. The sun dropped lower, and the world shimmered red. He heard it then, a sound weak as a prayer. He didn't understand the Apache tongue, but he knew that word. Water. He lowered his rifle. His hands trembled as he filled a tin cup in the bucket, knelt, and pressed it to the young man's lips. The Apache drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. The older one's eyes fluttered open, dark, wary, but not hateful. Elias gave him a drink too, one cautious sip at a time. When he pulled back, both men lay silent, barely alive but not dead. He dragged them into the shade of the wagon shed, found old linen and bound the leg wound. The younger one murmured something. Nantan. Elias didn't know if it was a name or a plea. Night came with no wind, just crickets and ghosts. He sat by the door, rifle across his knees, watching their shallow breaths. His wife's face flickered in his mind, her laugh, her small hands kneading bread. He closed his eyes and whispered, I hope you forgive me for this. Sometime near midnight, the horses in the corral grew restless. Bess snorted, ears flicking. Elias stiffened. Then came the sound, a low rumble like thunder rolling through stone. Hooves. Many. He moved to the window. A dozen shapes emerged from the desert, sliding down the ridge. Painted faces, feathers gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Apache. He had expected them. He stepped outside, rifle loose in his grip, palms damp. The night air was sharp with fear. The rider stopped 20 paces from him. No words, only silence. Then one dismounted. A tall man with hair braided down his chest and a bone knife at his belt. His eyes were steady, unreadable. Elias lifted his chin. Your men are inside. Hurt bad. I didn't mean harm. The Apache chief said something in his language, then gestured toward the shed. 2 men went, lifted the wounded carefully. The tall man watched Elias the entire time, face carved from stone. When the last of them mounted up, the chief looked at Elias again. For a moment, Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or respect born of necessity. Then the chief nodded once. The riders vanished into the desert without a sound. Elias stood alone, heart pounding. The only proof they'd been there were hoof prints and silence. He exhaled and sank to the porch steps, trembling with relief and confusion. He'd expected death, and instead received mercy? He didn't understand. By dawn, the world was pale again, all color washed away. Elias went about chores like a man sleepwalking. But the tracks outside the ranch felt like a scar, fresh, dangerous. When Cal returned that afternoon with 3 riders from the local militia, Elias's stomach dropped. "Boone," Cal called, voice hard. "We need to talk." The militia leader, a squat man named Sergeant Mathers, climbed down from his horse. "We heard Apache tracks near your place," he said. "You seen anything?" Elias hesitated. "Just prints." Mathers eyed the ground. "Fresh prints." He squatted, touching the sand. "Looks like you had company." Cal's mouth twisted. "Tell him, Boone." Elias met his eyes. 2 of them were dying. I gave him water. They left before dawn. Mathers straightened, face turning cold. "You did what?" "They have died here anyway." It didn't seem right. "Not right." Mathers barked a bitter laugh. "You handed water to the men who've been gutting settlers. You just saved killers, Boone." Elias didn't flinch. "Maybe I did. Or maybe I stopped a killing we don't even know about." Mathers shook his head. "You've been too long alone out here. That water's blood now." He stepped close, jabbing a finger into Elias's chest. "You remember this when they come back. You're on your own, Boone." Cal turned away, muttering. The men mounted up and rode off, leaving him standing in the dust. The desert fell silent again. Elias leaned on the fence, staring after them, unsure whether he'd done the right thing or doomed himself. The sun set slow, washing everything in dull copper light. Behind him, the windmill creaked, each turn a whisper of judgment. That night, the desert was alive with sound. Wolves crying far off, wind sliding through mesquite. Elias sat by the dying fire, Martha's old locket in his hand. Inside was her photo, faded, smiling. He spoke to her softly. "If there's a heaven, maybe you saw me today. Maybe you know I couldn't let them die, no matter what they've done." He looked up at the stars. "But I'm tired, Martha. I don't know what's right anymore." A breeze stirred. The well creaked again. He thought of those men, carried off by their kin, and wondered if one would live to see another sunrise. He hoped so, not for their sake, but for his own souls. He didn't sleep much. Each creak, each rustle pulled him awake. He loaded his rifle twice, walked the perimeter, drank coffee gone cold. Yet the ranch stayed still, blanketed in quiet. At dawn, he saddled Bess and rode the ridge. The tracks were already fading in the wind, the desert swallowing the evidence of mercy. When he returned, a piece of rawhide hung on his doorframe, a small token, tied with red thread. He didn't know its meaning, but it felt like something sacred. He held it a long while, thumb tracing the worn surface. Then he hung it over the hearth, beside Martha's picture. He poured himself a drink, stared into the horizon where the Apaches had disappeared. "Guess we're even," he murmured. But deep down he knew nothing was even. The desert never forgot, and neither did men. As the sun climbed, Elias felt a strange calm, a fragile peace perched on the edge of war. He'd broken the law of hate that ruled the frontier. And something in the air, some ancient whisper, told him the price hadn't yet come due. He turned back to the well. The bucket creaked, rising heavy with water, glinting like molten glass in the morning light. He took a sip, eyes closing. It tasted like dust iron and something else. Hope. And somewhere beyond the ridge, the Apaches who'd ridden away would remember him. Not as enemy, not as savior, but as the man who offered water when the world had none left to give. 3 weeks passed, and Dry Creek Ranch sat under a sky bleached white by sun and silence. The air smelled of dry grass and ash. No one came by anymore. Elias Boone, 40 years old and more ghost than man, mended fence lines that didn't need mending just to keep his hands from shaking. Word had spread through the settlements that he'd given water to Apaches, called him a traitor, a fool, or worse. He didn't argue. Men believe what keeps their hate warm. The only one who still rode out to his ranch was Sarah Dunn, 28, a widow from the nearby town of Prescott. She came each Thursday with a wagon of supplies, flour, coffee, news. Her husband had died in the war. Her voice still held its ache. She was small, quiet, but carried a strength that didn't fade in wind or rumor. That afternoon, she stood by the corral, watching Elias drive nails into a post. "You can't fix what folks want to stay broken," she said softly. Elias kept hammering. "I'm just fixing fences." Sarah tilted her head. "They burned the Crawfords' place 2 nights ago, 20 miles north. Some say it was your friends." He stopped. "They ain't my friends." "I didn't say they were," she replied gently. "But people don't need truth. They need someone to blame." He leaned on the hammer, sweat rolling down his neck. "You think I did wrong?" She looked toward the well shimmering in the sun. "I think you did human." He almost smiled. "That'll get a man killed quicker than anything out here." Her gaze softened. "Then at least you'll die different." The words lingered. When she left, the silence folded over him again. He watched her wagon fade into dust and wondered if kindness had a place in a land that fed on vengeance. That night, smoke painted the horizon red. Elias climbed the ridge, heart pounding. Fire danced across the valley. Another settlement burned. Gunshots cracked faintly in the distance. The war hadn't ended. It had just changed its name. By dawn, a lone rider staggered toward his gate. Cal Avery. His shirt was torn, his face gray, blood soaking one shoulder. Elias caught him before he fell. "Cal," he said, lowering him to the ground. "What happened?" Cal's breath rattled. "Raid. They came out of the dark. Burned everything. I tried to stop them." "Apaches?" Cal nodded weakly. "Yeah, but they said something strange. Said your name." Elias froze. "My name?" "Yeah. Said you'd understand why they spared the kids." He coughed blood, eyes wide with something like disbelief. "Guess they still remember your mercy, Boone." He died before Elias could answer. The sun climbed cold and white over the horizon, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The next day, Elias saddled Bess and rode toward the ridge. He found tracks, Apache ponies light and fast, heading north. Following them was a risk, but staying meant waiting for death to find him. He followed until noon, when the land broke into a narrow canyon lined with red rock. There he found them, 5 riders watching him from a distance, weapons lowered but ready. Among them was Nantan, the young Apache whose life Elias had saved. He was perhaps 20 now, eyes sharp as flint. He rode forward slowly, palm open in peace. Elias raised his hands to show he carried no threat. They met halfway between the shadows and the sun. Nantan spoke in broken English. "You give water." Elias nodded. "Yes." "You no soldier?" "No soldier. Just a man with a well." Nantan studied him. Then he pointed toward the hills. "White soldiers poison water. Kill women. Kill old." Elias frowned. "Poison? You're sure?" Nantan nodded hard. "We know fight first. They bring war. You help us." It hit Elias like a bullet. He had thought mercy might end the killing. Instead, it had shown him who the real killers were. "I can't fight for you," he said. "They'd hang me for it." Nantan's face hardened. "Then more die." Elias looked away, ashamed. "Maybe I can bring food, medicine." A cry from the ridge cut him short. A rifle cracked. Dust leapt at his boots. He dove for cover. The soldiers had followed him. Gunfire echoed off stone. 2 of the Apaches went down. Elias scrambled behind a boulder, shouting, "Stop! They're not attacking." But the soldiers didn't stop. They shot until the canyon filled with echoes of death. When it ended, the soldiers rode off, leaving bodies in the sand. Nantan limped toward him, bleeding from the arm. Elias tore his sleeve to bandage it. The young man looked at him, teeth gritted. "Now you see." Elias nodded grimly. "Yeah, I see." He helped Nantan onto his horse and led him back toward the ranch. By the time they reached Dry Creek, the sun was sinking. Sarah's wagon was there. She'd come again, worried. She gasped when she saw the blood. "Elias, what happened?" "Soldiers," he said. "They ambushed the Apaches. Nantan here, he's hurt bad." Her eyes darted between them. "You brought him here?" "He saved me once." Elias said, "Now I owe him." She hesitated, then helped him lift Nantan into the shed. Together, they cleaned the wound, boiled water, tore linen. Her hands shook. "Elias," she whispered, "if anyone finds him here, they'll kill you. They'll kill both of us." "I know," he said, "but I can't let him die again." Outside, the wind rose, moaning through the rafters. Sarah looked at him, fear and something deeper flickering in her eyes. "You're going to get us all burned." Before he could answer, a distant shout split the air. Torchlight flickered beyond the ridge. Riders coming fast. "Soldiers," Sarah breathed. "They followed you." Elias grabbed his rifle. "Get inside." They doused the lamps. The riders' shadows slid across the yard. Voices barked orders. A crash shattered the door. Soldiers poured in. Elias fired once, twice, before they overpowered him. He hit the floor hard, head spinning. Sarah screamed. A soldier tore her from the corner, shouting, "She's with him! Arrest her!" Through the blur, Elias saw them drag her outside, torches blazing. Then they set fire to his barn. Flames swallowed the night. By the time the soldiers left, only ashes and silence remained. Elias woke at dawn among the ruins, his head bandaged with his own torn shirt. The shed was empty. Nantan was gone. The tracks led west. He saddled Bess, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The soldiers would be heading to Fort Whipple with Sarah in chains. The Apaches would be heading for their canyon, hunted now like animals. Both roads ran through the same valley. He rode without rest. The wind whipped grit into his eyes. By midday, he saw smoke rising ahead, gunfire echoing through the canyon. He crested the ridge and froze. Below, soldiers had cornered Nantan's tribe, women, children, old men, against a dry riverbed. Muskets flared. The Apaches returned fire with stolen rifles, desperate and outnumbered. Elias's heart hammered. He could have turned away, could have ridden home to rebuild what little he had. But something in him, the ghost of his wife's mercy or the echo of that first cup of water, drove him forward. He spurred Bess down the slope. Bullets hissed past. He shouted, "Stop! Stop shooting!" His voice vanished under the roar. Nantan spotted him, eyes wide with disbelief. "You come," he called. Elias slid from his horse, dragging a wounded boy to cover. "You've got women and kids here. They're going to slaughter you all." Nantan's face was streaked with dust and blood. "Then we die fighting." "Not if I can help it." Elias scanned the field, mind racing. The riverbed. If they crossed it, they could reach the cliffs. But they needed time. He grabbed Nantan's arm. "Get them moving. I'll buy it." Nantan hesitated. "You die." "Maybe," Elias said, "but you live." He ran toward the ridge where the soldiers fired, shouting, "Hold your fire! Civilians down there." A shot grazed his shoulder. He stumbled, raised his rifle, not to kill, but to fire into the air. The crack echoed loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. The soldiers hesitated. For a moment, the shooting stopped. Smoke thinned. In that breath of silence, the Apaches ran, children clinging to their mothers, old men limping through dust. Nantan guided them toward the cliffs. Then the sergeant spotted him. "Boone, you bastard traitor." They fired. A bullet tore through his side. He fell hard, face in sand, the world going dim. He saw Nantan turn back, shouting something he couldn't hear. Then hands, rough but gentle, lifted him. Water touched his lips. It was Nantan, pouring from the same canteen Elias had once offered. The circle had closed. Elias tried to speak, but only blood came. Nantan pressed a hand to his wound. "You gave water," he said quietly. "Now I give it back." The gunfire faded. The world narrowed to wind and sunlight. Elias smiled weakly. Good trade. When soldiers reached the riverbed hours later, the Apaches were gone. Only 2 men remained by the well, one young, one old, both unconscious, their hands still touching the canteen between them. The dawn broke gray, cold and hollow. Eli McGraw hadn't slept. He sat beside the dying fire, the smell of charred sagebrush drifting through the canyon air. His rifle lay across his knees. Tala slept a few feet away, her black hair tangled and dusty, her wounded arm wrapped in a strip of his torn shirt. He hadn't meant to help her again, but something about the quiet between them demanded it. When she stirred, the morning wind caught the ashes and carried them eastward. "They'll come," she said in a low voice, eyes still closed. "They always do," Eli replied. They rode without speaking much, the horses weary from days of running. The land stretched empty around them. Cracked earth, scattered yucca, distant ridges like the backs of sleeping beasts. The war between blue coats and Apache warriors had burned this desert bare. Every mile was haunted. By mid-morning, buzzards circled overhead. The heat shimmered off the sand. Eli's canteen was half full. He kept looking back, scanning the horizon for soldiers. There was no dust trail, no sound of pursuit, but silence in the frontier never meant safety. At a dry creek, they dismounted. Tala knelt to feel the cracked soil. "There was water here," she murmured, "before your people came." Eli frowned, then tossed her the canteen. "My people didn't start this war." She looked up at him, eyes darkened still. "Then who did?" He had no answer, just the weight of years. Orders shouted, villages burned, the smell of smoke and fear. He'd ridden under flags, under promises, under men who said it was all for peace. But now, peace was a word that sounded like mockery. They walked their horses deeper into the canyon until they found shade under a ledge. The horses drank the last of the water. Tala sat against the rock wall, her face pale with exhaustion. "You could have left me," she said quietly. Eli didn't look at her. "You could have killed me back there." A faint smile touched her lips. "Maybe we're both fools." He gave a dry laugh. "Maybe." The wind carried a distant echo, a low, rolling thunder that wasn't weather. Gunfire. Eli's head snapped up. He climbed the ledge, scanning the far ridge. Dust clouds rose near the horizon. Cavalry riders. Maybe 20. They were coming fast. He slid back down. "We move now." They mounted, riding hard through the twisting canyon. The sound of hooves on stone echoed like drums. The path narrowed until the rock walls pressed close. They burst into open desert, galloping for the low line of hills ahead. Eli's horse stumbled once, but caught its footing. Tala leaned low, her braid whipping in the wind. Then the first bullet whined past. A puff of dust rose beside them. Eli turned, firing once. One soldier toppled. The rest fanned out. The chase had begun. For 2 miles, it was chaos. Hooves pounding, gunfire cracking, sand exploding around them. Tala shouted in Apache, urging her horse faster. Eli saw the ridge ahead, a narrow gap between stone towers. If they made it through, they might lose them the maze beyond. They reached it just as another shot struck. Eli's horse screamed and went down. He hit the ground hard, rolling. His rifle flew from his grip. Before he could rise, Tala swung her horse around. "Get up," she yelled. He grabbed her hand, hauled himself behind her, and they tore through the gap as bullets sparked off the rocks. The canyon swallowed them again, shadowed and silent. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was their breathing and the clatter of loose stones beneath the horses' hooves. When they finally stopped, they were miles from the pursuit. The horse trembled, foam streaking its neck. Tala slid down, pressing a hand to her wound. Eli caught her before she fell. "You're bleeding again." "Not from that," she said, looking back toward where they'd come. "From remembering." He held her gaze for a long moment. The anger that had once filled his chest was gone. In its place was something heavier, something closer to shame. "You said the water dried before my people came," he said. "Maybe it's time someone brought it back." That night, they reached a hidden spring, Small, shallow, tucked beneath the roots of a fallen cottonwood. Eli knelt first, cupping his hands, letting the cold water run over his fingers. Then he stepped back and motioned for Tala. She hesitated, eyes wary, then knelt and drank, her reflection shimmering the surface beside his. Two faces bound by war, both scarred by choices. When she rose, she said, "You could go back. The soldiers might take you in. I don't belong to them anymore." "You never did," she said softly. A distant cry echoed, an owl maybe. The fire cracked low. Eli sat beside her, back against a log. "What happens now?" Tala looked toward the horizon, where faint campfires flickered in the distance. "My people wait. They think all white men want war. But maybe tomorrow," she paused, "maybe they'll see something different." Eli studied her face, seeing the resolve there. "You plan to walk into their camp?" "They'll kill you if you come," she said. "But they need to hear that the fighting can end, that there are men who remember mercy." He didn't hesitate. "Then I'm coming." By dawn, the desert was wrapped in mist. They walked side by side toward the Apache camp, the silence between them carrying more weight than words. As they neared the rise overlooking the camp, figures began to appear, warriors armed with rifles and spears, watching from the shadows. One of them stepped forward, older, proud, face lined with dust and years. Tala whispered, "My father." The old chief's gaze fell on Eli, then the empty rifle slung over his shoulder. "You bring a white soldier to me," he said in Apache. Tala replied calmly, "He saved my life. Twice." The chief's expression didn't change. "Why?" Eli took a breath. "Because killing hasn't solved anything. Because I'm tired of burying the truth under blood." He reached for the canteen at his belt and poured water into his hand. "Because I still believe a man can offer water, not bullets." The chief watched him, eyes narrowed. Then he nodded to one of the younger men, who stepped forward and dropped a small pouch of beads into Eli's palm, a gesture of peace, fragile but real. It might have ended there, but the war never let go so easily. Gunfire split the air, shots from the ridge. The soldiers had followed them after all. Chaos erupted. Warriors dug for cover, women screamed. Dust rose in choking waves. Eli spun, firing once, twice. A soldier went down. Tala grabbed her bow, loosing an arrow that struck another. Then the chief fell. Eli dropped beside him, blood soaking his hands. The old man's eyes flickered. "Protect my people," he whispered. Then he was gone. Tala screamed his name. Rage filled her eyes like fire. She ran toward the ridge, arrows flying, fearless and doomed. Eli followed, reloading on the run. The ridge blazed with gunfire. He reached the top, dug behind a rock, and fired back until the hammer clicked empty. The last soldier was reloading when Eli charged. They collided, rolled in the dust. Eli's knife flashed once. The man went still. When the gunfire faded, only wind remained. Eli staggered to his feet. Below, the Apache camp stood silent. Smoke drifted over the valley. The war, it seemed, had ended in the place where it began, with water and blood. Tala limped toward him, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "He believed in peace," she said, voice breaking. "Now it's our turn." Eli nodded. His hands trembled as he unscrewed the canteen cap and poured the last of the water into the dust. It soaked in slowly, vanishing into the earth. "Maybe someday," he said quietly, "this ground will give something back." She looked at him, then at the horizon, where the first light of morning broke clean and pale. "It already has." They stood together as the sun rose. Two enemies turned kin by loss, and for the first time in years, the world seemed to breathe again. Later, when the story spread across the territories, of a soldier who offered water to his enemies, and a woman who carried hope where war had lived, no one could quite say what became of them. Some said they built a home near the spring. Others swore they vanished into the mountains. But the land remembered. The desert, once barren, bloomed again near that canyon. And if you listened closely, you could still hear the wind whispering their names. So, what do we take from this? The narrator's voice would ask, slow and reflective. Maybe this. The war wasn't won by bullets, but by the courage to share water. Out there, in that unforgiving land, mercy was rarer than rain. But when it came, it changed everything. He paused and added softly, "If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. Because sometimes, even a story can heal what we're trying to break."